Hermvids with Mr. Herman. Educational videos about reading and writing. Lonely, remorseless, puking. What do these three words have in common? No, they're not all descriptions for Mr. Herman. They are words created by the famous author William Shakespeare. These are words he invented. But the joke's on us, we still use these words and many of his words that he made up today. Now, you as a writer can create your own words to add creativity to your pieces of fiction. The 12th skill in our Storytellers unit is all about word creation, so grab some popcorn, relax, and check out these tips. Word creation. Many writers throughout history have created their own words. Like I mentioned in the intro, Shakespeare is known for creating many new words that we use today, including eyeball and assassinate. I'm going to give you guys some reasons why creating new words can be helpful, and then you guys are going to try it out on your own. Below I have a clip from a video game called Dark Souls, and video gamers are notorious for inventing their own words. Pone aptly describes what's going on in this video. Let's check out some of these new types of words. They're called neologisms. That's the overarching term for creating a new word. Neologisms show a new society. Here's what I mean by that. If you're creating some sort of fantasy, science fiction, or dystopian fiction setting, and dystopian fiction is a kind of a hellish future, you can create new words to indicate that there is a totally new society. The words we use today are totally different, or a lot of them are totally different than words used 150, even 20 years ago. So to indicate a new culture, a new society, you can invent new words to add to the realism there, or the pseudo-realism, I guess. This author named Anthony Burgess wrote this futuristic novel called A Clockwork Orange, which was turned into a film, which below there is a clip from. And in his book, characters have an almost entirely new language for different things. It gets confusing at the beginning, but your brain gets trained to pay attention to these new words and figure out what they mean in context. I think that he used a combination of British slang and Russian to create some of these words. Just one example of neologisms in fiction. You can create unique characters who use unique words, and that is another good reason to use neologisms. You can make them say neologisms to establish their identity and to show how tightly knit a group of friends is. Think of your group of friends, and if you guys have words that you use a lot, or even if you've ever invented a word together. This can show your bond as a group, but it can also show things like in this Mean Girls clip, when one of the characters, I believe it's Gretchen Wieners, tries to introduce the word fetch, meaning cool. But none of the other characters really latch on to this, and she's sort of made fun of for using the word fetch. Just one example, but it nicely establishes the character dynamics in the movie Mean Girls. Another pretty common example of neologisms are when you're trying to use them for humor's sake, and you can make some pretty crazy words if you wanted to for a punchline or just to add to an absurd feeling of your story. They can create some humor or nonsense. For instance, in the children's book author, and he wrote some adult stories too, Roald Dahl, the BFG, there are these big friendly giants who eat snozcumbers. Roald Dahl also in Willy Wonka's and the Chocolate Factory, or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, excuse me, he invents a lot of words there as well. Lewis Carroll, he invented a lot of words, and he has this famous poem called Jabberwocky, where he invents many nonsense words that have this bizarre quality, but you can kind of tell through context what's going on in them. He also invented the word chortle, which is a combination of chuckle and snort. Here's the excerpt from the Jabberwocky. "'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jub, burb, and shun. There's the Jabberwocky right there. Here are some types of neologisms. Portmanteau, I previously mentioned. It's when you take two already existing words, combine parts of them, and form a new definition. Sporks, chillax, brangelina, ginormous, hangry. Perhaps you've heard of those portmanteaus before. You take hungry and angry, and it becomes hangry, and it means when you get angry from being hungry, coincidentally enough. There are words called nonce words. A nonce word is a word that is used for an occasion where there's no other word for what's being described. Our language can only describe so much, so there are obviously emotions, ideas that you need new words for. So truthiness was a word coined by Stephen Colbert when he was trying to come up with a word for when news is not accurate, but it feels more emotionally accurate. Kind of like we were talking back with happening truth and storytelling truth. Then there's a nonsense word, not to be confused with a nonce word. It's a word that may have no intended meaning at all, that may just be for a more absurd feel. Dr. Seuss created many of these, just like in this example. At the far end of town where the grickle grass grows, grickle grass does not exist, and he doesn't really go into any more detail about what grickle grass is. So it's another example of a neologism. You will be practicing your own neologisms, or rather creating your own neologisms with this practice. You're going to be creating two neologisms. They can be any type we've discussed, portmanteaus, nonce words, or nonsense words, and you're going to use them in a paragraph. And you may perhaps use them in your own fiction writing.